Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Susan Corbett. I do custom machine quilting, and I've got a dramatic, colorful, high impact quilt here to look at today. There's a lot going on in this quilt, whole lot of components, and it took quite some time to do. The appliqué is fused, which presents a challenge all its own. We're going to open here with a long look at the background quilting. Traditionally, what you want to do behind appliqué is a bunch of straight lines because it's really good contrast. But I find it's also just as beautiful, if not more, to add some more flowers and some echo, some well-placed flowers and echo and some little flourishes to take up all that yummy space. It'll look really good. So my strategy here was to pick out 2 or 3 types of flowers that I have free-handed. I would really hate to think about spending all kinds of time doing computer designed motifs to fit in all these irregular spaces. Gosh, that would be a daunting prospect. And this is why I think freehanding is such a great thing to learn, because you can just go for it. Just put those things in there and zoom around all these places. And you know, echo is just your friend. It just is. And in this case, the flower and the echo are building off of one another. I'm doing each one as needed. So I'm not dropping in flowers and then going back and doing the dense background quilting. It's an organic process. So at times I'll have to stop and think, okay, now what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? Do I throw in a swirl, a leaf? How many rows of echo do I want? And what direction am I going to go in next? There's a whole lot of decisions that have to get made here. This kind of quilting is, I think, all the fun in the world. Okay, so one of the main motifs here in the background is do like a curl or a loop, echo that, and then add these feather-like flower petals. And these can be partials. You don't have to make it look like a whole flower. And this gets you out of all kinds of little design problems, because they can go in any direction. They can come from a straight line of piecing, or they can come out of an existing appliqué flower. Partials, you can make them look like they're behind this dragonfly, for example. And at this point, I'll say one thing about quilting in and around the appliqué. You know, as usual, my first order of business is to get the whole quilt stabilized. That means ditch quilting around the main components between borders and blocks, and edge stitching right around the appliqué. So, but what you can already see here, look at the dimension that's already created around the individual flower appliqué pieces. So going back in there and quilting around those things again turned out to be a useful thing. Number one, you can use those spaces as little highways, you know, to get from this section of the quilt to another. And you can fill in a little bit more closely. That kind of dense background quilting is going to make the unquilted parts really puff up. And that's what you want to happen to appliqué. So even though they're fused and they're pretty flat and stiff, they still puff up in this case, which made me very, very, very happy. I started to do some of the typical quilting I put in appliqué, veining the leaves and that kind of thing. And I gave up pretty quickly. I did that in some places where it was really going to pay off, but not over most of it. This quilt is big. It is a huge bed quilt. And it's one of those quilts where the more I quilted, the more there was to quilt. So I had my hands full with getting all of the components addressed without adding too many details in the appliqué. To do the stabilizing, I quilted with clear thread on top and white thread in the bobbin. The back is a black print, so all that white bobbin thread acts like thread play on the back. So that's really gorgeous. Why clear? Because of all the different thread color, all the different fabric color in here. It's all vivid, vibrant color, and I didn't want to change thread from one to the other all the time. I started out doing that. I started out with black thread, and that just didn't work at all. That was going to mean too many thread changes. So clear can be a real help in cases like this. And then for the actual background quilting being done here, I switched to white thread. I used an Omni, I think Omni Bright White. The batting in this quilt is Hobbs 8020. That's my favorite bat for great big bed quilts. The quilt is going to be really heavy without adding any extra weight to it. So that's a light bat that has enough loft to make me happy. It's not completely flat. Because with all this quilting, I want the quilting to show up. And while we're having this nice view of that frame, okay, the border print at the bottom and the black, well, the multicolored frame in between the border and the appliqué blocks is one piece of fabric. It looks like they're pieced, but they're not. But I quilted it as though they are pieced. And what I did was a freehand cable, which I was loath to try for so many years. And then one time I had a quilt where that was just what I thought the quilt cried out for. So I went for it, and as irregular and imperfect as a freehand cable is, it looked great. It looked really, I mean, okay, if you're quilting a quilt that you're putting in a major national show, that might not be the way to go. But I think it looks really awesome. And being on black, a black base fabric, all the little details are not going to show up much anyway. There's too much color and pattern happening in this quilt for you to notice the imperfections. So I just like how that turned out. It was one of the few places in this quilt where the quilting went really quickly. There's a lot of stops and starts in this background because, I mean, look at all the different components here. Look at, you start here and you end up over there, and now how do you get back to the other place to finish the rest of the background? You can backtrack if you want, but at some point a stop and start is going to be required. And that's just kind of the way it is. So you can see here that the larger flowers take up as much space as possible in the more open areas, and then it's mainly echo and such in the little tiny spaces. I get asked this all the time. How do you know how big to quilt the things? Well, how big is the space you have to work in? That kind of dictates the parameters already. It's not my decision. It's, when I say the quilt was talking to me, that's kind of one of the things I mean. That's how the quilt talks to you, in part. At first, I thought this background was going to go really quickly, but there's so much quilt that it took quite some time. But it was enjoyable. It was a whole lot of fun. And the payoff was instantaneous. I mean, it just looks great. And it kept on looking great. It was fun. And hats off to my client who actually, she didn't just fuse the pieces onto the fabric. She stitched them down. She's finished the edges. It's proper machine applique. I mean, the edges are not turned under, they're raw edge. But it's really going to help, especially a bed quilt, to stitch around the edges of all those pieces, or they're going to disintegrate at some point. I've been asked repeatedly, well, isn't there a thing you can do with your machine to finish off the edges? No, there isn't. And you don't want me zigzagging around your applique pieces with a long arm. That's a bad use of my time. Boy, that'll raise your price. If a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing well. That's not just an old trite saying, that's real. So I appreciate that. That's just going to be better for the quilt overall. She stitched it down with clear thread, which is great because you're not going to see it. All you see is that beautiful, vibrant color and the pretty fabric. This was a block of the month from several years back. It certainly has the visual impact down. I mean, it's a really pretty quilt. Okay, so how did I decide what background I was going to do? As I say, there were a lot of components on this quilt, and I could have done all sorts of great things that would have taken up a lot of time. So as much time as this took, it was far more expedient to do this than to carve it up with straight lines and free motion quilting. You could put all kinds of complex things in there, all kinds of different components. But this combo was going to be not the fastest in the world, but fast enough to be pretty darn custom without being so elaborate and time-consuming that it would be unaffordable. I'm not so fast at this that I can just fly through it. This took some time. It's the deciding what to do next that slows it down. And the getting, yourself quilted into a corner and figuring how to get back out again. Quilting in one continuous line is kind of an art form. You can get lucky and maybe your bobbin won't run out at the worst possible moment. I don't know, that's just luck of the draw. I suppose one of the easiest things to do would have been to pick one shape and go for the whole thing, but that would be boring, and that would get old really quickly. I see people doing backgrounds that are just nothing but circles, and that would drive me crazy. And I don't think it looks really great. I think it looks, oh, I didn't have any imagination, or I was too lazy to make it really look like something. I mean, if you like circles, okay, but I want the quilting to be much more imaginative than just one design over and over. Plus, a combo, that's just one of my favorite things. It keeps it from being boring. It adds all kinds of visual interest. And there's something about letting yourself quilt and seeing the great stuff that just pops into your head in the process. And the only way to get to create that skill is to get in there and do it. People tell me, well, I don't have these ideas. Well, you're not going to get them unless you get in there and play. And really, that's what this is. You can look at it as work, or you can look at it as play. And the magic happens when you start playing. I've had people, well, they tell me this all the time. So you're stuck here doing this all day long? How can you stand it? There's nothing I'd rather do. I don't think it's the death penalty. I think it's fun. It's like a big puzzle. All quilting is problem solving and puzzle solving. And this definitely was, especially in see that big, beautiful block over there to the left, the purple and green and pink. Okay, once we get into those pieces, that's where the real puzzle comes in. But doing this background quilting was kind of a puzzle. You know, what am I going to quilt next? What shape lends itself to this piece of background quilting? I may want to do a certain flower, but if it's not going to go in there, then I need to find something else. Now we're coming up on a part that I thought was really cool and fun. In the middle of that flower, the center, that little gold part, I thought, well, what'll I do with that? I think most people would think, well, you can't quilt anything in there. You just have to leave it blank. And that's where I think, oh yeah, no, I don't think so. That's where I would go in there and put a bunch of little circles or something. I don't know. Some echoed shapes, some little circles. And does it make any kind of a difference? Oh my goodness, yes it does. See, now to me it looks finished. It looks complete. I think custom quilting is so worth all the effort. So it was a good idea for the pattern designer to have included a bunch of different styles of flowers here. Similarly, it's a good idea to quilt a bunch of different types of flowers, flower shapes. So here I've done a round flower that fans out. And now as we go into this next part, it would be good contrast to do something different. So let's see what flower emerges here. We have some echo to get from one place to another. This flower is one of my favorites to quilt. With pointy petals, that sets up some good contrast with the short, rounded, curvy petals of the flower it's up against. And those petals can be, they're just fun to make because you can make them wide or thin, long or short. You can put some curves in there. See how the curve is implicit in all of those petals. And you can make them, like a feather. They'll fit in all different kinds of shapes. So it's a lot of fun to do, and they serve all kinds of great space-filling purposes. So I love the way this is turning out. Now here that space is big enough for a little flower or some leaves, or I decided on a partial flower. And see how good that looks? It's like it's behind this appliqué flower. So I don't need all the parts, but it still tells this flower story and looks really good.
This motif in the center of the quilt is computer quilted. And then I added more of those flowers in different places. And then I added this motif here in the corners. And that intersection of fabric was just sticking up there. So I did some inner echo and stippled that down. And then I echoed the whole thing to link it up. And then I thought, well, what am I going to do for background quilting? And all I heard was stipple, which I never do anymore. It's boring. We've got so many other meanders out there in the world. Why would you want to do that? Well, in this case, it's because of all these little spaces in here. I only ever stipple anymore when I've got a tiny space to fill where no pattern would be recognizable. And that's a little bit of what's happening here. So I'm pretty shocked. I don't exactly remember how. Of course I know how, but I'm not proficient at it anymore. I used to think it was just the greatest thing in the world when I first got machine quilting, but I don't anymore. One of the reasons I think it's effective here is because of the contrast. The thread I'm using is this neon green and yellow variegated, because the colors in this quilt are so vibrant. See how it looks white in this photo? It's not. That is green and yellow. So stippling the background is really going to make those motifs be a lot more recognizable than they would without it. I don't want to make this really big. It'll just call attention to itself. But I don't want to make it the smallest in the world either. The rule is you don't cross over any lines, except I do. When I need to. I don't see what the big deal is. What's the consequence? And if you do it small enough, especially when the thread matches the background fabric, you can't really tell. So I don't stress out about it.
So what made me reach for neon thread in the first place? Color this deep and saturated fabric this deep and saturated with color just eats thread color. I don't care what you throw at it, you're not going to be able to see it. The only thing that is going to show up is something like a neon. And it's no good choosing a safe color. This quilt is a brightly colored quilt, and that's all there is to it. So, the neon doesn't look neon, I don't think. And in this case, it just played such an integral role in getting these motifs to show up at all. Otherwise, you probably may as well just do some boring overall quilting that doesn't really do anything for the quilt. The thread really helped sell these motifs.
The other thing about stippling is it's tedious. It's fun at first, and then I start thinking, how much more of this do I have to go? Make it stop. So to get in and out of these little spaces, I like to either leave, like crawl up the side and leave room to come down the other side, or do a little bit of backtracking along the line of echo.
For all of this patchwork, there's a big center square, there's 4 great big triangles, and then there's 4 smaller corner triangles. And all the shapes that go in each are some combination of a center wreath, a circular wreath made up of flowers, little individual flowers sprinkled where I need them to go, this great big corner motif that is its companion design that goes with those flowers. And then there's a freestanding different kind of flower that we'll see in an upcoming part of the video. So all these triangles are different sizes and different fabrics, and so I had to figure out how to position these motifs. What angle, what size. That was the puzzle solving that happened in these parts. It's a pretty nifty feature of my new long arm that I can change the size just by plugging in some numbers, and I can rotate the motifs to get them in whatever shape I need them to go in all the different directions. So I'll explain more about that later. So these are the smaller corner triangles. And here I've used the big corner motif and in 2 of the individual flowers. And as I began echoing this, I freehanded a big old leaf there in the corner. And now I'm discovering, to my horror, oh look, there's some more of those little funny spaces, and I'm going to have to do more stippling. And I don't want to stipple the background like I did, you know, all the background like I did in the center. So what's going to be the solution? And I like what I came up with here. I like it a lot. I especially love it in this corner because the thread is going to show up far more in this section than it will anyplace else. This is going to be very effective. And I don't prefer to have dense background quilting right up against some more dense background quilting. So I decided, let's leave the background unquilted and let's just put some dimensional quilting inside the echo. This is going to sculpt out this beautiful design with the least amount of quilting possible, but that is still going to provide enough thread play to frame this motif and set it apart so that you can see what's going on. So it wasn't fast, but it wasn't as slow as just a bunch of, you know, a lot more stippling would be. I love it. And I'm cheating here because some of the echo ran right into some of those little small spaces. So I don't quite know how to explain. Like I just stopped quilting here and began quilting over there. And so technically it's not one row of echo that gets quilted completely, but it's going to look that way. I didn't use up the whole cone of thread on this quilt, but I thought I was going to. And I've got that in the top and in the bobbin as well. So it's going to look pretty dramatic on the back. So the back fill here is just a little, it's kind of an arc. It's a cross between an arc and a wavy line. So anybody can do it. It's kind of hard to keep track of, you know, which is the beginning and which is the end. Is it curving this way or that way? But it's maneuverable, so you can make it go in whatever angle you need for it to go in. It's great to quilt inside the echo between like around your feathers. I don't know. It's just a useful tool, and the more you play with it, the more you see where you can use it to great effect.
So now for the background quilting on this. You see there's a whole lot of unquilted empty, and I don't have any plans to put any more motif in here. So what's going to be the rationale? I'm addressing these two different ways. On this one that's a little bit smaller, here's what happened. I echoed mostly inside, I stippled inside the echo. And here, I'm going to echo and then do some background quilting outside of the echoes. So that's one thing. Another thing, I composed this out of a bunch of different elements, and you see where this one starts here and ends there. They don't connect, and I've got to find a way to get them to connect. So what I'm going to do is cheat. And like years ago, I heard machine quilting can be a little bit like frosting a cake. You can just put more stuff on and cover up all kinds of mistakes or empty places or whatever. And so the more quilting you add, the more you will obscure some of the little problems. The problems will still be there, but you won't notice them. Thank goodness. So, I had to find a way to make all these connect and fill in this space here. And each block turned out a little bit differently. The spacing is different. I don't exactly know why. That's just what happened. Even with computer quilting, there's what you plan and then there's what actually comes to be. All right, so that's one challenge. This motif is kind of a freestanding piece, and I think it looks pretty unfinished. I think it looks really sparse. So I'm going to beef that up a little bit, and then at some point, all right, as I say, each one turned out differently. Look at the disparity of how much space there. And the spacing here in between is just a little bit different. That happened everywhere. So some of the echoes and the background quilting is going to connect, and some will, those motifs will still appear to be freestanding and on their own. So let's see what happens.
Here is that motif as quilted. And see here, I put a row of echo underneath it to kind of beef it up. And now what I'm doing is echoing around the whole thing and joining it up with swirls. Echo, 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 and then I'll be adding background quilting of stippling with swirls to kind of break up all those large areas. And all of that quilting is going to sculpt out these individual motifs, which really need it here. You can't see the thread as well on these fabrics. It blends in. Now look what a difference the background quilting is already making here. It's going to go very rapidly from an indistinct jumble of things to a sculpted, delineated, beautiful, harmonious design scheme. I'm loving the dimension already. The echo serves as a way to isolate that motif and cover some ground to cut down on the volume that needs to be background quilted. And by opting for a combination background, this is going to go faster than it would be if I just picked one design. I like the combination of kind of a small to medium stipple with some swirls thrown in. Swirls of all different sizes. It accomplishes the same thing. It flattens the background but gets it done a lot quicker. And the combo looks good together. There is the finished block, and now for something completely different. There's a lot of ornate quilting happening here already, so I felt that in these black and gray spaces I needed something really calm. And I like what it did for the quilt. It really does so much more than I thought it was going to. I was second guessing my decision big time, but I love it. I love the way it turned out. A quilt needs a place for the eye to rest, and this is it. And really, up against all this deep saturated color, the black and the gray print and color serves the same purpose, to calm the whole thing down. So in the corners where those patches form a big triangle, I'm quilting a type of Greek key. And as I progress further down, the lines will just be straight lines, just plain channel quilting. And this view gives you a much better look at the blue, green, and yellow triangle. Look at the dimension. I'm loving that. Look at the sculpture created by all that quilting. Extremely well worth it. Lines are still not the fastest thing, and I was constantly measuring to keep the increment the same because when we get down to the bottom of that black patch, I want to be ditch quilting in between, not just quilting indiscriminate lines that fall wherever they fall. And they've got to go around the applique pieces that are on top of that black fabric. So not real fast, but very effective. And for this, I was using gray thread. Not black, not light gray, something in the middle that would just blend right in.
So now we're at the border. I had grand plans for this border. I was going to do it with the computer and it was going to be great. And hours of frustration later, I saw that it was not going to be great. So one of my solutions was to put that same motif here. It doesn't show up as well because it's in black, but whatever. That was going to get me out of the problem of getting the lines to match up at the corners. My next, plan B was to do straight lines, and they've just come out so much farther apart than I thought they were going to. So that much quilting compared to this much quilting, I think is a great big imbalance. So my plan to use the computer to speed through the border where the quilting's not going to show up anyway because it's black, or where it's not black, the fabric is really busy. I'm going to go back in and do more lines. So not fast, pretty darn slow. I've kind of outsmarted myself. So see, I'm always looking for ways to speed up, go faster, do something easier, get that price down. So, had I started doing lines with a ruler, I think I'd be done by now. Well, that is beautiful. Look at that great texture happening there. That went really quickly, but getting the initial lines put in with the aid of the computer was so much work. Getting it to line up here was incredibly tricky. Just hours and hours of frustrating effort. So now, what do I do here, if anything?
Well, I just left it the way it was and called it a day. Here's a good look at the back. Isn't that pretty? So thanks so much for watching. Thanks for showing up. Much love. See you next time.